Hey guys, thanks for tuning in and welcome to 8 Great. Today we're going to talk about comic book movies. Now, as always, there are more than just 8 great examples of comic book movies out there, but I really wanted to narrow it down to 8 great examples of what a comic book movie should be. Alright, now first up on the list we have to talk about Iron Man. Iron Man is an awesome movie in every way, shape, and form, much less it's an awesome comic book movie. I mean, this has everything you want out of a comic book movie. It's got action, it's got adventure, it's got explosions, good guys fighting bad guys, it's got everything. On top of that, it pays such great tribute to the source material it comes from with just a few minor tweaks. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man was perfect casting in every way. This is the movie that started the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it today. I mean, everything that we have seen come out of this world started with this movie. Captain America, Thor, the Avengers, everything we're expecting to see like Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man and everything else all started with the original Iron Man movie. I mean, the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it today owes everything to this movie. Alright, now next up we have Blade. Blade was an awesome movie, okay? And the cool thing about it was not a lot of people who went to go see this movie who had never read a comic even knew it had anything to do with comics. And when you told them that this was a comic book movie, they were surprised and it made them want to see other comic book movies. And some people even went on to become comic book collectors just because of this movie. It was well done. Wesley Snipes was great casting for this role. I mean, Blade really never saw much success on the page. He was always kind of a sidelined secondary character, kind of to help move plot along in the comics. But after this movie, he became more of a mainstream Marvel character, and they were able to do so much more with him because people were actually interested in this character. It had everything that you want in a cool vampire movie. On top of that, it was just a really good comic book movie that really did kind of take its source material, twist it around in a very interesting way to make people love this character and the world that he lives in. I mean, all in all, it's a fantastic comic book movie. Alright, now next up we have to talk about Watchmen. Watchmen is an awesome movie. I mean, it is a visually stunning, dark, gritty superhero crime drama with kind of an apocalyptic feel to it. I mean, we really get pulled into this dark, gritty world with these characters and everything they're going through. In my opinion, this is Zack Snyder's best film ever. He did a fantastic job with this movie. I really was kind of sorry that it didn't receive the support and critical acclaim that I thought it should, but all in all, a fantastic comic book movie. I mean, just the Rorschach scene alone where he's in the lunchroom at the prison and that one line he gives out is probably one of the best lines in all movie history, much less comic book movie history. All in all, a fantastic comic book movie. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, the original 1990 movie is a classic. It's a great comic book movie, and a lot of people didn't even realize at the time that it was based on a comic book. In fact, a lot of people just thought it was based on the kids' TV show that was on at the same time, but it wasn't. This was based on the Eastman and Laird comic book. This was a dark, gritty movie with a lot of dark, gritty concepts and just visualizations throughout the movie. It really wasn't ever geared specifically towards kids, although a lot of kids went and saw it, just like I did. But I love this movie. I mean, everything about it still holds up to this day. It is the premier example of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles outside of the comic book. Hands down, great comic book movie. Now, you cannot talk about great comic book movies without talking about The Dark Knight. This was a superb movie, much less a superb comic book movie. I mean, take the comic book element out of it. Somebody who's never even read a comic book will love this movie. Everything was done perfectly. The acting, the directing, the story, the plot. Christian Bale's portrayal of Bruce Wayne and Batman in this movie was better than the other two, and Heath Ledger as the Joker brought this real anarchist, creepy vibe to the character that we don't often get to see even in the comic books, much less on screen. I mean, fantastic adaptation of a comic book onto screen, hands down one of the best. Alright, now speaking of Batman, we have to talk about 1989's Batman, starring Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. This was a great movie, and this was the first adaptation of The Dark Knight that we got to see come to the big screen. I mean, we had never seen Batman like this ever before, other than in the comic books, and it was amazing. I mean, Michael Keaton as the Batman, awesome. I mean, and nobody expected it either. I mean, he was funny man Michael Keaton from Beetlejuice. Nobody expected him to do such a good portrayal of Batman and Bruce Wayne. And Jack Nicholson as the Joker did an amazing job. I mean, he pretty much pulled to the screen exactly what we see in the comics every month. I mean, hands down, fantastic, fantastic comic book movie that holds up to this day. Now next up is the movie that was so good and connected with me personally so much that I got a quote from this movie tattooed onto my arm. and that's The Crow. I mean, this movie is fantastic, and a lot of people really connected with this movie on an emotional level, especially if you've ever lost somebody that you care about. I mean, a lot of people say that this movie owes its success to the fact that Brandon Lee died while filming the movie. And that may have been what got people to go to the movies to see it the first time, but by the time they've watched this movie, that's not what had them loving it. This movie was so well done, so well written, and so well acted by Brandon Lee. You really do connect with it on a level that's far above and beyond what most movies give you. The fact that it was based on a comic book is almost inconsequential at this point, but it still deserves to be a great comic book movie. The Avengers. How can you not have the Avengers at #1? I mean, even though this isn't necessarily a countdown list, I think most people will agree that the Avengers is probably the #1 comic book movie of all time. I mean, it was so well done, so well received. There's nothing about this movie that I can complain about. There's nothing about this movie that I dislike in any way, shape, or form. I mean, the first time I went to go see this movie, I had really high expectations, which usually leads to me being at least a little bit disappointed. But I was blown away, so much so that I saw this movie 4 times the first week it came out and loved it even more every time I've seen it. It is such a great movie on every level. It gives you everything you want from a great action movie, from a great comic book movie, and the translation from what the Avengers represented and what these characters really brought to life on the page was so well transitioned over to the screen. Joss Whedon did a fantastic job, and as far as I'm concerned, it is the best comic book movie ever made. Alright guys, well there you have it, my list of 8 great comic book movies. Now I would like to throw in just a few honorable mentions that almost made it on this list, but just not quite. X-Men 2, X-Men First Class, Hellboy the original, and Kick-Ass. 4 fantastic comic book movies. If you haven't seen them, go check them out. Now, what I'd like you guys to do is leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the list. And if you want, leave me a list of your 8 great comic book movies. As always guys, I appreciate you watching, and we'll talk to you later.